Mound Bayou at one time was the cotton capital
Mm-hmm.
of the world.
I not read
You read about
reviews,
that, yeah.
the best cotton in the world.
Best cotton. They
Mhm.
sold it down the river, but you know, like 150,000 bales of cotton during that time
Mm-hmm.
was huge.
Mm-hmm.
But black people did it. So from the beginning, Mound Bayou was, well, it was like what white folks always want to do. Sell you something that they figure you can't do anything with.
Mm-hmm.
For an example, Mississippi Valley State was sold to Dr. White, and it was a mud hole. But now it's a university.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Stuff like that that they did. Mound Bayou was sold to Montgomery through the railroad company because it was a slum area.
Mm-hmm.
Woods and everything was here. But
Mm-hmm.
look what happened to it. They came in and the settlers, the early settlers, would clear the debris during the day and stay up at night to kill the bears and other wild animals off because see when they left Jeff Davis and Ben
Mm-hmm.
and came up here, that was the whole idea. Montgomery was too smart. He wanted to get him out of sight. Send him, let him buy that land in Mound Bayou, what is now called Mound Bayou.
Right.
We'll be getting rid of him, but then they put him in a gold mine, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And you see what's here today. Because see, during that time, they didn't want Montgomery around. He was speaking for the governor and all those folks. He went to Washington to make the speeches and stuff for the state of Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
So they always had a hard on, so to speak, for Mount Mount because the Negro was sparred here. He had blanched head Bruce
Mm-hmm.
and black marshals or sheriff they called them back in the day. So from right in Mount Bayou. So Mount Bayou was prospering all the time. Steady. Every time they throw a stone, we'd break it up and keep moving. So we had a fire that destroyed quite a bit of the history of this town.
Mm-hmm.
Build back, and then later on, instead of teaching our folk to stay here, once they graduated from high school, Greyhound put on 3 or 4 buses to take them to Chicago, Detroit, or St. Louis away. So that's why it's really dying out because your heritage left
Right.
and there's nobody to teach. They won't let you teach black history
Right.
in the schools of Mississippi.
Right.
Yeah, that's a no-no. To tell the truth, the whole story, then hey, it goes back to Bilbo and that group that just didn't like black folks. But see, I never was able to understand it. My mama couldn't ever explain it to me. And I asked the question, nobody still answered it. I can't see how I can't sit in the classroom with your child. When you get in your Cadillac on early in the morning, come across the railroad track and pick me up to go to your house to cook, wash and iron and put clothes on your child. But they can't sit next to you in school. I've never been able to understand that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they call them whatever, ain't and aunt and all that kind of stuff. But see, we still fighting the same old battle that was in 1888.
Mm-hmm.
In 2022, we still fighting the same thing. But it's in a different look, they covered up.
Right.
But white folk just don't like black folk, period.
But there's a story about how the best grade of cotton in the world came about in Mound Bayou. Let me just tell you a brief history of the black people who founded Mound Bayou. They ran a plantation called Davis Bend in Vicksburg. That's where the people from Mound Bayou came. But it just so happened on Davis Bend, Joe Davis, was Jefferson Davis' brother. Jefferson Davis was against black people even talking to each other, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Davis not only allowed his slaves to talk to each other, but he slipped them books that the other
I did read that. He
other folks
educated
didn't want
them.
to know nobody.
Mm-hmm.
They got so smart until they did all the buying of the crop, the cotton and everything. They did all the shipping and everything for Davis Bend. They got so smart they ran the store, So when they took the land back that they saved from the Union Army, and the people in Mound Bayou came here and started to farm, they already knew how to grow this cotton. That's why they were so smart. That's why we had the best rate of cotton in the world. They knew what they were doing. Even though they had to do their own land, and they told the people, if you did it for the white folks, you can do it
For
for yourself.
yourself.
And the Vietnam, and that's what. Now the other thing you were talking about, Diggs,
Mm-hmm.
who was the representative in Chicago. Now, the way I understand what happened when the Emmett Till
Yeah.
situation
Mm-hmm.
is that the sheriff told the undertaker who had the body, when he looked at it, said, "Put it in the ground, just bury it right now." And the guy said, "Well," but Dr. Howard, when he heard about it, that they were getting ready to bury him,
Mm-hmm.
I understand he called called the sheriff in Chicago. The sheriff called the sheriff in Glendora and told him do not bury that. So when they didn't bury him, then they was able to for the mother to come and see it, and said that she wanted exposed and
So what was that time like when Miss Till was here?
Discovered the body. My dad said he prayed real hard. He Methodist minister. He had a church in Greenwood. He was on his way home on a Sunday. He said they stopped him at least 6 times between Greenwood and Mound Bayou. And see, during that time, black folk wasn't supposed to have no decent car to ride in.
Mm-hmm.
He said the first time they stopped him, he said, "Boy, you got the guns and stuff in your cars. We're gonna search it." He said they looked up under the bottom of the car, opened the trunk, raised the hood, everything. He said, "Well, you must be well, I said, you must be a nigger preacher." Because he had this scarf, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the collar on and black suit and all. And he said, "Well, Lord, you got me through that stop." He said a few more miles, he would stop again. He said when he got home, he called my wife, my mother, Willie. He said, "Willie, it's been a long night. I've been coming from Greenwood for at least 4 hours." But normally that's a 45-minute drive. But he said, "I'm tired, I'm going to sleep in the morning to pray." And he always talked about that. He never did get over that. You know, out of the 88 years he stayed here. But we were never treated equally because you were from Mound Bayou. And they had an old saying, when you went to Cleveland or Shelton to buy something, if you was from Mound Bayou, you answered them yes and no. And they identified you right away. So they from Mound Bayou because of the way you spoke and answered the white folks. You didn't say yes ma'am and no ma'am, you know, yes and no. And they identified you that way because of the way you spoke. They say they're smart from Mound Bayou. It's Mound Bayou folk. So during all that time, there's a whole lot of stuff happened. But it comes and goes when you're trying to sit in that distance.
Right.
To say all that stuff, it comes, you think it is, and you think of something else. But all in all, we suffered a whole lot. Of course, now, during my time, and I can say this, we robbed the railroad. We robbed the train. We set a little trap. Train came through. Black folk didn't have coal and wood. And that train stopped. This one had us on the railroad track. We unloaded the train that night and sold the coal and wood to folk in there. So, you know, survival was the name of the game.
Yeah. Right.
So that means we had a quarter in our pocket to go to school the next day where we could buy a box of chocolate milk and a bag of popcorn and talk to the girls. And see, I had a little advantage because I worked at the service station on weekends. made $2.50 a day. But on Monday morning, I was rich going to school. See, I new girl coming to school. I'd buy a box of milk and a popcorn so we could talk, you know. So they said, "Well, you got money." No, I didn't have money, but I had done a 4-day work job and two in one. But
Right.
the thing was, everybody in Mound Bayou during that time was closed house. He called himself Space Shot. And you know, he had that keen voice. He talked on the way in. And one lady was saying, "Well, I'd like to meet him where he's talking." I said, "Be quiet, that's his wife sitting right there. No, don't do that." But see, and you know, nobody never raised any saying about that. We got along like brothers and sisters regardless.
Mm-hmm.
Let me say this. When I first came to Mound Bayou, see, I guess I was new, and I was always wanting to be involved in something. So mayor had been in his office for 40 years, and they hadn't had an election.
Mm.
And I'm saying, what's going on? See, they just appointed the members of the board, and that was it. And they just kept going. He was a lawyer, and he knew everything. So I decided with one of the nurses with the hospital, we were talking one day, and we decided to have an election. So we had an election, and several of the top gentlemen in the town sent word over there that they wouldn't do that if they were me, you know.
Mm.
But anyway, we started, and we got some town people to run for office, and the main person that we wanted, I won't call his name, but maybe I will, Dr. Burton, he didn't run for mayor. But anyway, we got somebody to run for mayor. He didn't win, but at least that was the first election
Right.
we had in about 30 years. But I was involved in a lot of things. The health center
Mm-hmm.
was the first rural health center in the country. The urban health center was in Boston. And the rural, they were trying to find out where they would put it in the United States, the urban one, and they decided in Mound Bayou.
Now, is this the HMO hospital, the first in the country? Is this the one you're talking about, or?
HMO,
no.
you know what HMO is? Was the hospital over here,
Okay.
the National Doctors Table.
Okay.
It was the first HMO, and from that, all around the country, HMO, but I'm talking about the rural health center.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to go out there and see it, and you need to see the city hall. But what I was about to say is after we worked about 6 months trying to put things together for the hospital, the guy who was gonna sell us the land to put the hospital decided that he and the mayor got into it, and they had a dispute and wouldn't sell the land. So they called me and said that we don't have any land, we have to move it to what's it?
Lost.
Mark, Mississippi. Now, they told me later that they didn't have any land, they was just saying that, but anyway,
Mm-hmm.
I said, we can find some land anywhere. So they called me to Boston, and when I told them I could find some land, they said, we got 2 weeks to go back to find some land for the health center. So I came back, and the first day after I came back, I met Mr. Latham on the street, and I talked to him, and he said, I got, because they had told me we needed 5 weeks to do the hospital, the health center.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, yeah, I got some land. He said, how much you need? I said, what you got? He said, how much you need? I said, well, I told him, I said, we need 20 acres. So he said, okay, you get that 20 acres. So I told him that, and that's what the health center is over there now.
Wow.
Yeah. But anyway, and let me say other things. I got involved in, I started working for the health center.
Okay.
And we started on houses to find out. I did a Brick Creek house, because we started Mound Bayou Development Corporation
Mm-hmm.
had started a brick factory, making bricks. And out of the Brick Creek house, stick built house, and a prefabricated house to see which one was the cheapest. Somebody heard about it in Washington after the tornadoes that tore up a lot of places around Indianola.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I ended up being on the board, because they said we need to get together and try to build some houses that was substantial for the people around in the area. So our first meeting was in Indianola, and we got together and started, and it just so happened that I made a presentation of the minutes of the first meeting what we had of the Mound Bayou development. No, I'm sorry, the Mound Bayou house. What is Mound Bayou?
I don't know what that is.
What's the name of the, well, it's
Delta.
still operating after 50 some years.
Delta
I'm
Housing.
still on the board.
Oh,
I was
wow.
president for about 30 years, but I got off and gave it to somebody else. But anyway, that's how my name got on the, was one of the subdivisions. And the reason that was because the first subdivision we did was like Green Acres
Mm.
and Pine Lane.
Mm-hmm.
So I said to the board, I said, look, that don't make any sense. Why not name the development after somebody, you know,
Right.
at least have. So anyway, we named several others after people's name, but that's how my name got on it. But the board started in 1971 after the tornadoes started. The Delta Housing Development Corporation.
Okay.
So
Now I want to take a trip to the past, because a lot of people know about the Underground Railroad, but then you all here in Mound Bayou called it the Underground Railroad Station. Can y'all touch on that?